All right, so today I'm going to be talking about the product analytics and tracking for the UDH EAM module. I primarily do the EAM module, so I'm very familiar with it, and I'm going to just be walking through a few slides here for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, and then I'll open it up for questions if anybody has any. So just as an overview, the product analytics and tracking for UDH, there is a sub-module known as the data acquisition and publishing module. You'll sometimes see the word DAP, D-A-P, that's the acronym for that module. And the module contains a configurable framework that allows it to collect data and publish design related data. And it's really just raw data that's collected from the design in AUD from the documents internally embedded SQLite database. So for those on the call, I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but in AUD has an embedded SQLite relational database inside the drawing, and that's where really all the data is stored. So this module really lets you collect data that you want to do analytics on from that database or from the drawing and publish it out to a data source or different data sources. And really the thought behind this is it helps clients use the published design data to make better informed business decisions using some sort of business intelligence platform that they're using for other analytics and reporting needs. And I just thought this last bullet point, I just wanted to point out, a lot of people when we talk about this think that it's, the analytics that we have a dashboard or we're doing reporting in the EAM module off this published data. That's really not the case. It's not a reporting engine. It's not a dashboard. Its main purpose in life is to just acquire the raw data from the design that the client wants to report on in some way or do analytics on in some way and publish it out so that those downstream systems can use and process it. And it's really expected, since the data is in its rawest form, that the reporting engine or the BI platform that a client is using will massage it or transform it or transfer it into a data lake or a warehouse. Moving on, let's see here. This is just a really high level architecture, just so everybody can kind of gain an understanding of this. So we have the AUD client right here, a user using the utility data hub or AUD product, and this DAP plugin that I'm showing right here sits on top of the EAM module, and that EAM module is just a plugin itself to the AUD product. So when a client wants that configured, this DAP plugin that we're looking at can acquire data, as I've said, from the SQLite or the drawing, and then publish it out, possibly to a file server, to web services, REST or SOAP, and primarily we publish it out to whatever database the client wants the data landed in. So these are just some examples of design data that could get published out in a particular format to help a client use it by downstream systems. And I just really wanted to touch on this point briefly. In the architecture, we refer to these tables if it's being published out to a database in the raw design data format as landing zone tables. And really, these landing zone tables are the primary collection points of the raw AUD design data that is to be used for analytical purposes. The tables are really not intended to be for direct reporting engine consumption, but that's really ultimately up to the client how the tables are set up. It's what we anticipate is the data in these landing zone tables will just merely act as a source for the downstream amalgamation of the data from other systems. And the schema, there is no out-of-the-box schema for these tables. It's completely dependent on what data is being published from a client. What data they're interested in would drive the schema for those tables. And then just some key concepts of this. The mechanism of how design data is captured per client requirements is in a data structure that we term as a DAP definition. And the DAP plugin itself can support one-to-many DAP definitions, so you can have as many of these as you want. And each DAP definition is composed of just two main structures or concepts. And one of the data structures is what we call a DAP acquisition definition. And that acquisition definition is just informing the framework of what data to acquire and when the framework is obligated to acquire the data. And I'm going to show you an example of these definitions in just a moment. And then the second part of it is the publishing definition. And that just informs the framework of how to publish the acquired data, the acquired data, whether it's going to a database or a file server or calling a REST or SOAP-based service. That's how the data is published. So, and here it is. What I decided to do was just put a screen grab in here, and I'll show you this in the EAM module as well in a moment here. But this is an example of an actual DAP definition, and this definition is used to gather the design time that a particular designer is working in the drawing. So you can see over here, like in this example, I have two DAP definitions configured, and we're looking at the design time one, and you can kind of see that this is a section right here of the acquisition definition, and here's the publishing definition, and just some verbiage on design time. It's really configured to capture the overall design time less the idle time. And what I mean by idle time is just when the drawing's opened up on somebody's laptop and they're not doing anything. The system's not in an idle time when they're typing on the keyboard or clicking on the mouse. So there's an idle time threshold that's configurable. So maybe you want to say that we will let the system be idle or let the user not be doing anything for 10 minutes before we consider that 10-minute time period and anything after idle time where they're not actively working on the design. So that's what the design time metric is all about. And this gets into this slide shot, just shows you, I'm kind of showing some screenshots in the design module here of how this is configurable by an admin or somebody like that. But this is showing really a little bit more info on the acquisition of the data. And what I'm pointing out here is the acquisition obligation. So when does the system acquire this design time data? And right here you can see that we have just 5 out of the box ways. And what I have for this demo that I'll be showing is the data is going to be required when I save the drawing. So every time a save happens, or when the document's closed. You can also hook these things up, acquire the data on a timer. So like maybe every 10 minutes or something like that, the timer would go off and acquire the data. We allow for custom acquisition of the data, as well as command-based acquisition of the data. And paging down, this is just another example. I'm not trying to make anybody's eyes gloss over in this, but this just kind of shows the configurable nature of it. This is a publishing definition, and this one, in this particular definition, it's publishing it out to a database. So there's some insert SQL that I'm showing that's going to get executed based on the data that was acquired, some cleanup SQL and some select SQL that the framework's going to run to get this design time published out when the data is acquired. And let me actually jump over to a VM here, and this is where it does get a little bit tricky to demo this, simply because this is all happening in the background. It's nothing that the user is going to be notified on. There's not a UI or anything like that. So what I thought that I'd show you is I have this drawing up right here. We're linked up to a work order. And I have a backing database where this stuff is getting published to. So I wrote some SQL here just to show you. If we take a look at this design time, so we're looking at this work order right here, and this metric is collecting it based off a work order. The current active user, I'm logged on to this machine as a user called SBS. This is the design status. So when this is saved, it's also recording the status of the design. And this KPI numeric value is the number of seconds. We have a unit of measure on this table for seconds for design time. So for example, if you can see that this is 221, if I go back into AUD and save this drawing right now, that 221 should jump up a few seconds. Yeah, so now it's at 367. And again, if I'm like clicking in here on my mouse and stuff and saving it again, that design time will jump up again. So, you know, the thought behind clients that have wanted this is probably just to see how long designs are taking, possibly do some, you know, analytics on the type of work orders that are taking longer. Since we're saving the user, you know, you could also do analytics on, is there a certain group of users that are, you know, might need further training because their designs are taking so long or whatever. And saving work order information in here kind of lets you join it up against, you know, different work order types and stuff like that. I just wanted to show you, I have some other examples of some things that clients have asked for this, different types of metrics that maybe will get your brain churning on what's possible in here. So one client wanted a record of every time a drawing is opened and closed. So we're kind of looking at data here. I have things ordered by the work order. Here, we're seeing that this is the open and close time metric, and it's just really recording a date when the drawing was open and when it was closed, and who the user was that performed that action. It's not, this metric doesn't really have anything to do with whether they were working on it, the state of the drawing or anything like that. They're probably just wanting to know, sum up all these open and closed times to see how many times maybe a drawing is touched, by how many users, you know, etc. So that's what that one was about. Another client asked for metrics on, these are just simply counts. So these are a description of really the object and material type status. So you can see like this is the status of the piece of material. These are being installed. This is an existing piece of material that was modified. It's a main. This is recording the length of that main. And then these are recording counts of each one of these different fittings by their size description. So that might be important. I don't know if that's important to you, but it was important for this client to do reporting on that. And then another example, these are just truly counts. This client wanted counts by work order of different things that were in the design. So like the mains count, footage of the mains, non-networked features, a fittings count, a services count, etc. So these are the type of things that also can be kicked out on just merely counting features that are in the design by status, feature type, or model name, something like that. And lastly, we had, I guess I can discuss for a current client, when we were collecting what analytics they wanted, we were getting requirements like, oh, we want all the data, give us all the data so we can report on all of it. So what we ended up doing for that is this engine can actually extract the SQLite database that's in the design. And for that, we published that out to a file server, and the client wrote a scheduled job that looks for these databases that we post on the file server, and they literally rip through the database and take all the design data and put it in a data lake. And they're putting it in a data lake because they're want to report on it sometime down the road. And they felt that just having access to all the data in the design was the best way to do that, instead of constantly, giving us requirements for this metric or that metric that they wanted collected. They just wanted us to make the entire database available to them, so we can definitely do stuff like that. Almost out of time here. Does anybody have any questions at all on this?
Hey, Joe, I do. This is Dennis. What kind of overhead does that add when you're writing that much data out of the system? And I know it's going probably from the SQLite to the analytics lake, but are users going to experience differences with this kind of activity going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if there is a ton of DAP definitions defined, and depending on the acquisition obligation, if they're all hooked up on document close, for example, when a document is closed, depending on the complexity of the analytics or the data that we're trying to suck out of the design, they could experience, a couple seconds more on a close time or a couple seconds more on a save. It just really depends on how complicated they are, the number of them, and how the data is being acquired, or when the data is being acquired.
Okay, that sounds good. That doesn't sound too burdensome though either, if it's just on saves and closes and such. So.
Right. But that is something, Dennis, that when we're configuring this for a client, if we're hooking things up to a timer, we try to spread the times out just so it's not noticeable for the user. Stuff like that we can do.
Joe, has anybody gotten far enough along to start looking at correlations between, various elements of design and then construction related issues and such? Is anybody taking this out in terms of seeing how designs impact project construction?
That's a good question. I don't know. I have indirect answer to your question. I have Hydro One. It probably is doing the most metrics on stuff right now, after seeing screenshots of the analytics and the dashboards that they're putting together. So I would bet, by next year's PUG, with the dashboards that I've seen that Hydro One is putting together, they probably have some really good responses to that. I'm just not aware of really how this is used after we get it all set up for a client.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exciting stuff. This is really good. So, and for all of you listening in, we really encourage you to share some of these problems that you would like to solve with us too, and hopefully we can find some ways to take what you're doing to the next level in terms of just making your business run better.
So we do have a question from the audience. Is this something we can configure ourselves? If so, how do we get this?
Yeah, so this, like I say, this is a plugin to the EAM module, and by default, it's not included in an implementation unless it's specifically asked for. So if a client wants this, all they have to do is just say, hey, we want the DAP module included in our build, and we'll turn it on so that it's included. Now, can they configure it themselves? I think with training, just same with like AUD rules and configuring AUD. I think over time, they can be trained to do it out of the gate. I think that SBS would need to configure it, and maybe work hand in hand with the admin user at the client site. But it's definitely something that they can configure, and I'll just show you really quick. I mean, this is a particular setting, so when you include this module within the EAM module, you have this DAP option right here, and this is really how you'd start configuring. You can add a different definition, tell it how to acquire the data, how to publish it out, etc. So all of it is configurable by an admin and tweakable by an admin at a client.